Well, thank you guys for coming on a Friday afternoon and celebrating International Waffle Day.
Yes.
We kicked off by listening to the Weird Al song Waffle King,
Which is amazing.
Is totally a song about this ego trip dude who thinks that he's the man because he has found the perfect waffle recipe and is known as the Waffle King. And because anytime anybody mentions waffles, that's the first thing that pops into my head. But in a way, the Waffle King is the inverse or the reverse of the subject that we're going to talk about today, which is essentially people pleasing. And I want to kind of kick everything off with this story because I think this is probably the best way to illustrate what people pleasing actually is. And for us to be able to go, oh, yeah, I know what that looks like, or, oh, I think I have that maybe as something that I do. So I'll be asking you guys some open-ended questions, but then when everything is over, I'll open it up for more specific questions related to your work experience or your professional experience, or maybe even just stuff that you want some answers and some help with. We'll be able to do that at the end. Sound good?
Yes.
Okay, so let me tell you a story about a lady named Sally. Sally is a super hard worker to the extent that she does everybody's job in her office. She's also the boss. She has admin people, but she does the admin people's work. She has accountants. She does a lot of the accounting work. She has different staff that do and are responsible for different elements of the business. She actually does a lot of their jobs. Now, she does all this stuff for a couple reasons. From her perspective, she wants to be the best there is at what she does. She puts excellence into every single thing that she is a part of. But there's another reason below the surface that really drives why she is such a hard worker that's always working and always striving and always getting things done and always telling people yes. Yes, 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 yes. Now, we're also going to talk about the different ramifications of these behaviors, because it's not just what it seems like on the surface. On the surface, from the outside looking in, it seems like Sally's a super hard worker, really dedicated to her job and who really loves what she does and the people that she works for and works with. Now, yes, she does have people that she is a manager over, but she also has people that she has to answer to. People that she is managing over, she takes care of all of their things, does a lot of their jobs. The people that she has responsibility to, she has a hard time saying no to, and also feels a lot like she's being taken advantage of, like she is being used and she's not being appreciated for all the things that she does. Sally has a problem. You guys know what it is? Obviously, the subject matter of today can kind of lead into what Sally's big issue is, but here's Sally's real problem. Sally's real problem is she's afraid. The issue underneath the issue is not necessarily the people-pleasing, but the cause of the people-pleasing. And the cause of the people-pleasing is Sally doesn't believe that she is worthy. She doesn't believe that she's good enough, and so she has something that she's trying to prove to herself, and at the same time, she's trying to prove it to other people. But this insecurity and this self-doubt and this lack of faith and belief in herself has caused her to build up these patterns of doing things for other people and valuing the perceived idea or the perception of other people's attitudes and beliefs towards her as being more important than her own feelings about herself. She doesn't really know what that is. She doesn't know what boundaries are. That's a foreign concept to her. She doesn't know how to say no. That's never been something that she's ever done before. She doesn't think that she's allowed to. But she feels taken advantage of by the people that she is, answers to, like the executive people, because she always gets things done. So what do the people above her do when they need something done? Do they take care of it? Why should they have to? Sally will do it. So of course she feels taken advantage of. Why can't these people that are responsible for this stuff, why can't they do the work that they're asking me to do? But then she's doing the same thing to the people that she's responsible for. And so you see how this is a issue and a problem that has all of these ripple effects all across the board. Now, are there issues between her and her bosses? Yes. Are they addressed? No. Are there issues between her and the people that she manages? Yes. Are they addressed? No. Because from their perspective, she doesn't trust us to do our job. She's always got to do it. So why should I even show up and try to do anything? Why should I put forth my best effort? Because she's going to come along behind me and say, oh, good job, but you really should, this could be done a little bit better. Let me do it for you. That feels like the boss doesn't trust me with what I'm supposed to be doing. So I've got a couple different options. A, I cannot show up really. I can bring my body into work so I get a paycheck, but I'm not going to bring my heart because what difference does it make? I'm not going to bring my creative ideas because what difference does it make? I'm not going to really bring my effort because what difference does it make? And this undermines the relationship that Sally has with her staff. Does she really not believe that they're good enough to do their job? No. But she doesn't know how to talk about that, and they don't know how to talk about that with her. Because there's this ongoing cycle that's all fueled by fear. Anybody know any Sallys? Anybody ever been a Sally? Okay, me too. It's ironic in a way. It was 9 years ago. I left. I used to run a radio station here in town, and I started when I was a freshman in college. They had never hired a freshman before. I came in with experience. But I was Sally, in essence. And as a college freshman, I made it my prerogative to learn everything there was to know about how to do this job. To the point to where when I was a sophomore, I had basically usurped some of the seniors at that point, and I was given more responsibility because I was a super hard worker and got everything done. And I always showed up on time or early, and I always did above and beyond what was asked of me. But I had that underlying fear that I'm not worthy. And if I don't make myself irreplaceable, then what am I really going to be offering them something? I thought I was offering them excellence, but the real fear, the real driver for me was I want to make myself so irreplaceable that they can't fire me. But guess what ended up happening? I got burned out. And that happens when you operate from this fear. You feel burned out, you don't feel worthy. You also don't feel like the people that you're answering or you're responsible for answering to value you and believe in you and respect you. Because one of the things that people pleasers, I'm just going to speak for myself, one of the things that we typically struggle with is a lack of recognition from others, which is why we chase after it, and a sense of validation or a lack of a sense of validation. So when we're not receiving that, especially from the people that we're doing all this stuff for, and they just continue to add more on to the things that they want us to do, that fuels the burnout. And it also fuels the resentment. Because, dude, am I not doing enough for you? And then everything escalates. So we can see that the costs here are magnificent. We haven't even gotten to all the costs yet. So we haven't even talked about the issues that you can have with your customers. This isn't just something that's confined to the relationship dynamics between the managers and the employees and the managers and the executives. Because in any organization, for-profit or non-profit, there are people that are impacted by the organization's work. Here's where that can come into play. You guys ever heard of a term called scope creep?
Scope what?
Scope creep? I'd never heard of it either. But this lady was telling me about it, and so
I made it up. I'm just kidding. I didn't make it up. I'm just kidding.
No, Katie was like, when you talk about people pleasing, make sure you talk about scope creep because it's a real thing. Mm-hmm. So I did some research, and I've experienced scope creep too. So some of the work that I do is private coaching with individuals and consultations with businesses on healing relationship dynamics. Because whether you're talking about the relationship with your significant other, relationships with your family, relationships with your business, guess what those all have in common?
Relationship.
Yes, and you're all dealing with people.
Yeah.
Okay? So the same things apply, they just apply in different ways. All right? Scope creep is something that can happen in any relationship dynamic because what can end up taking place is because you don't believe in yourself and you don't value yourself and you don't believe you're worthy, that can get reflected to you in your relationships with other people, especially customers, who after you guys have already agreed to, this is what the deal is going to look like. For this amount of money, I'm going to do this amount of work, and I'm going to deliver this thing for you, and I'm going to have it done by this date. Well, 2 weeks in, that same customer that has already agreed to these terms is calling you up and saying, hey, I want it done 2 weeks earlier, and I want to add these things to it. A people pleaser goes, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. Well, you better make it happen. I'm paying you for this, but you're not. Now there's extra stuff and an earlier timeline, and because you're so afraid of losing the customer or losing the business or them walking out the door on you, you say yes. Instead of having boundaries and a clear standard for what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, you give in. So scope creep happens in small businesses, it happens in freelance and self-employed work, it happens in large corporations, but it's all driven by the same thing. It's all driven by fear. It's all driven by a lack of belief. And I point to my heart when I talk about belief, even though technically a belief is something that happens up here. If you didn't feel it in here, it wouldn't be a belief. It would just be a thought.
Yeah.
Okay? So here's the core. This is something Katie and I talk about all the time, and some of you guys, Tim knows this. The whole methodology of the way that I live and the way that I operate and the things that I teach are this. We are gardens. Our mind is a garden, our heart is a garden, our body is a garden, and our spirit is a garden. It is up to us to be responsible gardeners. So what we plant and foster and cultivate inside our minds with our thoughts and our ideas and our beliefs, and in our hearts with our emotions, and in our spirits with what we allow ourselves to just kind of saturate ourselves with, and also with our bodies. Whatever we are spending our time inundating ourselves with, that's what's going to grow and be produced with our life through our actions, attitudes, and behaviors. It's also going to be what we attract into our lives and what we experience being reflected back to us in our relationships. So if you're looking at any experience that you have and what you're seeing is not what you want, you have to go within yourself and take responsibility for your part. It's actually not the other person. They're reflecting back to you what you believe to be true about yourself. That's a hard thing for some people to take, but it's the truth. Because I can recognize in my own life that every bad relationship I ever had, they were showing me what I believed to be true about myself. Every difficulty I ever had with another person, they were reflecting back to me what I believed to be true about myself. So was it their fault that they hurt me? No. I'm actually thankful for what they showed me and what they taught me, because it showed me what I needed to do within myself. I'm going to give you an Einstein quote here in a minute, but before I do that, you guys know what the Abilene paradox is?
Mm-hmm.
No.
You do?
You've never heard of it?
Never heard of the Abilene paradox?
No.
Okay.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. Yeah, so my girlfriend was telling me about this. She's like, you need to incorporate the Abilene paradox in your talk. So I looked it up on Wikipedia. It is a total thing.
It's a total thing.
So here's what the Abilene paradox is, and it's something that people in Abilene actually struggle with a lot. So it's no surprise why it was named the Abilene paradox.
What is it?
So it's based on a story. I'll tell you another story, okay? It's the late 1800s. There's a family that lives like probably around Coleman, okay? And the mother goes to the father early in the morning. It's probably 7:30 or whatever. He's drinking his coffee, and she's looking at him and thinking, I bet he's really bored. He probably wants something to do today that's interesting. Well, I don't really want to, but I bet he probably wants to go to town. He probably wants to go to town, referring to Abilene. So she asks him, honey, would you like to go to town today? We can go shopping and we can, see the sights and do all these things. And the husband's like, I don't want to go to town. That means I have to load up the wagon, we got to load up the kids, we got to do all this stuff. It's going to take, an hour and a half to get there because this is 1800 something and they don't have cars. I don't want to go. But she's asking me. I think that means she wants to go. So he tells her, sure, honey, I would love to go to town today. Well, they go ask the kids. She goes and asks the kids. And one by one, each kid does not want to go. But because mom is asking them, each kid believes that mom wants to go to town and they want her to be happy. So each kid says, yes, Mom, I would love to go to town. They don't want to go to town. Mom doesn't want to go to town. Dad doesn't want to go to town, but everybody thinks that the other person does. So they all say, yes, we would love to go to town. Now, they load up the wagon, they ride into town. Maybe it takes them 2 hours. I don't know. I wasn't around back then. But they spend their time in Abilene doing whatever it is that you do in Abilene in 1895 or whatever. Going to the shops, getting some corn dogs or cotton candy or whatever it is. Maybe they get a new hat or a new, I don't know. Yeah, they get back in their wagon and they ride it back home, and they get back home, and Mom wants to make sure that everybody's had a good time. So she asks Father, hey, Father, did you have a good time today? Hey, you know what? I had a pretty good time. I'll be honest, though, I really kind of wanted to just stay home today. So they ask little Bobby, little Bobby, did you have a good time today? Yeah, I had a good time today, Dad, but I kind of really want to stay home, too. So then they ask, random person name, Gertrude. Gertrude, did you have a good time today? I had a good time, Daddy, but I really wanted to stay home, too. Turns out everybody wanted to stay home.
And everybody regretted going.
But they all said yes because they assumed that that was what somebody else wanted, and the other person's happiness was more important than their own. So nobody got what they wanted, even though they all said the same thing. Now, this can happen a lot, but it's kind of an inverse side of what people-pleasing is, because we're making an assumption about what somebody else wants, but we're also, in that assumption, de-escalating our own desires and placing the perception that somebody else wants this, and that's more important and a higher priority than my own desires. So I'm going to do something that I actually don't want to do because I believe this person does, and I would rather them be happy than me be happy. And it's fear, and it's dishonesty, and it's insecurity, and it's brokenness. And then it perpetuates itself out over and over and over and over and over again. So what's the solution?
Be honest with yourself.
There's a couple things. Einstein said, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. Okay? So, if insecurity and fear and a belief in unworthiness at the root of everything is the actual cause of the problem, we can't move forward and escape or overcome people-pleasing by still operating in this place where we don't believe in ourselves, we don't value ourselves, and we believe that we're unworthy. And where we place a higher value of other people and their wants and needs over our own. What has to happen is we have to shift into a different way of thinking, in a different way of operating, in a different way of being. Now, this shift is not complicated. It's actually simple in practice. In respect of time, I'm not going to get into all the details. If you want some of the details, I've got, or what I've done in my own life to overcome this. And I'll tell you another story in just a second that illustrates how far I've come in a very short amount of time. But if you want help with that, I've got trainings and books and all kinds of stuff at my website, which is dgrantsmith.com. So there's that. But here's really what it is. You shift your beliefs. And your beliefs are up here. Thoughts, beliefs, ideas. All a belief is a thought that you've thought over and over and over and over and over and over and over again so many times that you believe it to be true without questioning. That's all a belief is. A belief is not inherently true. That was a revelation to me. I used to think that all beliefs were inherently true because the place that I heard about beliefs the most was at church. And I thought, okay, well, if beliefs are kind of spiritual and everything that I'm hearing at church is true, then that means I can't change a belief once I have it. No, it's not. It just means you get to think a new thought and train yourself to think a new thought until you accept it as true. If you've lived your entire life in this place where you don't believe you're worthy and you don't believe you're good enough and you are sacrificing yourself to try to make other people happy because you think if they're happy, then maybe I might be happy, but you're not, and you're basically living by the Abilene paradox, on top of other things, the root of that, digging into the soil in here, is a belief. You take that belief out and you adopt a different one. And then here's a simple way of doing a belief change. Affirmations and looking at yourself in the mirror and speaking to yourself the way you want somebody to speak to you, but it's coming from you, so it has way more power. So if you look yourself in the eye in the mirror and say, you know what, dude, you're awesome and I love you. Even if it feels uncomfortable. I'm speaking from the perspective of a guy. Most guys don't like to look at themselves in the mirror and give themselves a pep talk because that's not cool. Screw that.
I love you, man.
Yeah. But telling yourself the affirming things that you wish somebody else told you, you got to be your own true love. And you got to be your own best friend. And when you do that and you practice that and that becomes true, that changes your belief. And then you start operating in a completely different way. So here's an example of what that looks like. I told Tim this story yesterday, because yesterday it happened. Homeboy, I'm so honored. Turns out I'm the first person that he's ever cooked breakfast and dinner for.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
same day.
In the same day.
The same day.
What?
I know. And that's,
Somebody has too much time on his hands.
I was just like, you don't do that for your wife?
that was my question. That was my
his
question.
And my question was, what about your kid?
You're welcome at my house anytime.
I'm burnt out, man.
Yeah. All that people pleasing, you got this. So I had this guy.
Just kidding.
Here's a place where people pleasing can really come into play on in a way that we don't expect it to come into play. But I'm going to tell you my experience, and if you've had a similar experience, hopefully this will help you in some other ways. Maybe you guys spend any amount of time on LinkedIn. Okay. You get messages from people you've never heard of before, and they say that they saw your profile and they really like what it is that you do, and they want to see if they can have a conversation with you. Yeah, okay.
Such a scam.
Sometimes, yes. I actually send messages to people after I go to their profiles and look at their stuff, but I have a different methodology. I wrote a book about how to do this in the music industry about 8 years ago. When you're authentic and you've actually been to the person's profile and you really do want to make a connection, you tell them what it is that you saw on their page, what article they actually wrote, how it actually impacted you, because it's genuine and it's authentic.
Then they respond.
But also your heart's in a different place. You're sending out a different energy.
Right.
So I had this guy message me, and he said, hey, I saw your profile. I've got a unique profile. On all of my social media platforms, they all say the same thing. My profile says, I am love, because that's who I am. I am love, and I teach people how to grow and cultivate healthy relationships by treating their hearts and minds like a garden. All my social media profiles say the same thing. I call it relationship growth farming. And you see that all over my stuff. That's the authentic, real thing. That's what I really believe, and that's who I really am. And when they see that, they're like, oh, this guy's not talking about how he does this, and he does this, and he does this. What I do is a reflection of who I am. I'm used to people saying that I saw your profile and it's really cool and I want to talk to you. This guy said he wanted to send me referrals. Now, I'm all for serving more people, so I thought, cool, let's have a conversation about it. I guess that's what he wants to do. He wanted to set up a conversation with me. And this is what he wrote. I want to send you referrals. I like the work that you do. Okay, cool. Now, referrals are pretty old-fashioned and simple. If you know somebody that needs help having stronger relationships, hey, I got a buddy named D. Grant. Here's his information. That's easy. Oh, you came to me by this guy? Well, maybe I should send him a referral fee, just to say thank you. That's simple. It occurred to me when I was in the shower yesterday morning, this guy might be trying to sell me his program. I don't know why I have this thought now, but I'm going to make sure that that's not the case, because I'm not interested in a program. And that's not the reason why I agreed to have a conversation with the dude. So I sent him a message. I'm like, hey, man, just want to double check before we have this talk. You're not trying to sell me a program. We're actually talking about, referrals and stuff. And he's like, yep, okay, cool. Well, get on the phone with him, or video, and I reiterated this one more time just to make sure. Hey, man, the reason I sent you the message is I get a bunch of people that message me all the time, and they say they want one thing, but they're really trying to sell me a program. I just want to make sure that's not what you're doing, that we're actually talking about referrals. Yeah, man, I'm not here to sell you a program. Awesome. He asked me some questions about my business, and then he starts telling me about his program.
And reading the Bible.
Now, the people pleaser former version of me over here would have sat there and listened to his whole spiel about his program for 30
Wasting an
minutes
hour.
or an hour. His presentation was awful. He didn't speak very good English. He ran on sentences all the time. Nothing was really all that organized. And I'm a speaker and a presenter, and I've been doing this for a long time. I almost wanted to say, dude, you need some work on your delivery here. You might actually want to hire me to help you do a better job of this. But I didn't because I was so miffed at the dishonesty of what had taken place. But I'm not in this people-pleasing place anymore. So I just, standing in this place, I was like, hey man, I got to pause you for a second. Remember at the beginning of this conversation when you said you weren't going to sell me your program?
Why are you selling me your program?
And he said, I'm not twisting your arm and making you do anything. What kind of effed up manipulative crap is that? So he goes on for another 2 minutes before I press pause. Hard stop. I was like, hey man, I'm not the right guy for you. This is not what we agreed to talk about. And by the way, referrals are simple. That's what you said you were going to send me. Referrals are simple. And I just reiterated. I know a guy that does relationship stuff. Here's his information. If he actually works with me, I'll send you some money. We're good to go. That's old-fashioned. Your system doesn't make any sense, and I'm not the guy for it. But appreciate you. Have a good day. Click.
I am Sally.
I've gotten a lot further along with that. I used to be Sally.
Oh my gosh, I'm so Sally.
Okay,
Dee's helping me not.
But
be Sally.
here's the thing. I used to be Sally too.
We are all Sally.
Okay, and I think so. Here's what I think. Part of what leads down the evolution of Sally. People, I would imagine all of us in this room, we all have really big hearts. We love people a whole lot. We have wanted so badly our whole lives for people to believe in us with the same fire that we believe in them. But we probably have also been through all kinds of different experiences where our own sense of self, our own sense of self-worth, and our own identity was not something that we knew about, understood, or was even taught how to cultivate. We were probably very likely programmed, conditioned, modeled by other people how to do these Sally behaviors. And we adopted this stuff and we believed this stuff because that was what we were shown by our parents and our teachers and our caregivers. They were doing the best they had with what they had. They didn't know that they were being Sally. They were oftentimes angry and bitter at other people for taking advantage of them and not treating them very well and not paying them very well and going behind their back or adding extra things onto stuff, whatever the case may be. When the real problem was they were Sally. One of the beautiful things about living in the place that we live in now and the levels of consciousness that we've gotten to as a human society is we're more aware of the real problems that we go through with ourselves, with our own mental health, our own emotional well-being, our own spiritual well-being, than we have ever been. And with this awareness, though, comes a responsibility for us to work on us. And to get out of the mentality of, I'm in a bad work environment. They don't value me. They don't appreciate me. It's all their fault. I was talking to Katie earlier this week. There's something called Ho'oponopono. I'll just tell you guys this real fast before we wrap things up and open it up for questions. But basically, Ho'oponopono is this method. Have you guys heard of that?
Hawaiian.
Yeah. Okay. So there's this. It's this old Hawaiian practice that goes back several hundred years. But Hawaii is a island of different families. So if, Jimmy and Stan, I don't do so hot with just random names. But Jimmy and Stan are fighting over the same girl. All right? And both of them, she actually likes both of them, but, they're going to fight each other and they're going to send their clans basically at war with each other. Instead of having that happen, the elders, the grandfathers of Jimmy and Stan, and go, well, you guys sit down right there. Us old men are going to go into the tent and we're going to talk. So they go into the tent and each one of them says, I'm sorry. Please forgive me for whatever it is that's going on. with your grandson that's being reflected in my grandson's behavior. I recognize that it's something inside me and it's something inside our family, and we've got to take care of it. It's our responsibility. So they have 200% responsibility if they split. How do you split 200% responsibility?
100% each.
Evenly, right. So when people say, well, I'm doing my part here, it's a 50-50 thing, I'll take 50% responsibility, you're cutting out 50% of the responsibility that's actually yours. 100% responsibility means you take 100% responsibility, and there's no blame. Now, I know that this works in terms of Ho'oponopono. It's a simple 4-phrase prayer. I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. There's this really powerful book called Zero Limits by Joe Vitale and Dr. Hugh Lin. And Dr. Hugh Lin, tell us another little side story. Basically, he ran the prison ward of the most dangerous prison in the psychiatric unit of the most dangerous prison in Hawaii for about 8 or 10 years. And when he came on, every inmate was in shackles. They couldn't go anywhere without being chained up. It was the most dangerous, violent criminals. By the time he left, there were 255 prisoners in there. By the time he left, there was only one prisoner that still had any shackles on at all. They had become peaceful and tranquil and taken responsibility for their actions, even standing before the judge and saying, I am totally guilty of everything I've been accused of, that I've denied for the past 5 or 10 years. I'm totally guilty of. I want you to give me the maximum sentence because that's what I deserve. And their radical change of heart blew the judge away to the point of saying, I'm not going to give you a punishment. I want you to go be the spokesperson for whatever it is that you've done to totally eradicate and revolutionize your life. That kind of work, all Dr. Hugh Lin did was sit in a room, look through files, and say that same Ho'oponopono prayer. Because he recognized the only reason why these people were on his radar at all, the only reason why he was even made privy to the knowledge and information about these criminals was because there must be something inside of him that was being reflected in these files. And he took 100% responsibility for whatever it was he didn't know. It's not a direct mirrored reflection. He didn't kill his wife and kids. But there was something in the underneath the surface stuff, the deep spiritual stuff, the deep belief stuff. He took responsibility for it. And in doing that, God did the magical work under the soil. Healed his own heart and healed the person he was praying for. When it comes to people pleasing, we have to work on ourselves and we have to take responsibility for ourselves.
Oh my God, handle this.
Let God handle the rest. That's the way that this works. Going back to that Einstein quote, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. We have to change our beliefs. We have to commit to the process. We have to be faithful to ourselves in this endeavor. So it doesn't matter how long it takes you to stop being Sally. You make the commitment to be you. That's how we do it.